Whenever you fade the music, we're in.
Okay.
So this is Rob Shumay from Lake Lure, North Carolina, and I am again joined by my co-host, the legendary Coach Ed Warinner. Good afternoon, Ed, from Boca Raton.
Good afternoon. It's great to be back.
Yes, it is. And, we got a full slate today, so I want to just dive right in and start taking a look at some of the most important games with respect to the college football playoffs, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, let's do it. It's
All
exciting time
right.
here for college football.
Yes, it is. So let's take a look at Georgia, Texas first. And I'm gonna speak as a fan on this. And I think this comes through in a number of these games where we have a bias. And in this case, the bias is they've already played.
Right.
So, the first meeting was 30-15. Georgia won that. Um, I think in that game, I think it was a little unusual. Georgia jumped out to an early lead. They had the benefit of some turnovers deep into, they got the ball on a short field, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think every year is a new football team, and you're learning who your football team is. And I think Texas grew into who their football team was, and Georgia maybe had a little better idea early, and knew what to hang their hat on. And maybe that's why. Maybe they just because the first 3 or 4 games of the season traditionally are learn about your football team and then get into conference play. But nowadays you start conference play right off the bat. So there's no preseason. There used to be a preseason. You played 4 non-conference games. You learned who your team was. You learned who you were. And now that's changed. So all of a sudden you're diving right in, and right off the bat, you're playing Georgia, Texas, and you've got to learn. Each year is different, and there's no carryover from the year before, but with the number of kids that transfer and the portal and the turnover that you have. So it'll be interesting to see. The game's in Atlanta. I think that's an advantage to Georgia. I know Texas travels well, but think about it. They have an hour trip. They don't have to get in an airplane. They bus from Athens over to Atlanta, and they play in a dome where they've played there many, many times. Texas has got to get on a plane and fly into Atlanta, and it's just a whole different operation. So, and that's probably why Georgia's favored by 2.5.
Let me ask you this: as a coach, how much of an impact does that first game have when you're game planning to play a team a second time?
Well, I think it has a lot, but in this case, because of the time difference, these teams have had a chance to change, grow, develop. Injuries. There's a lot that's gone on in the 12, 13 weeks since they played that, they're different teams now. Maybe they've settled in on different thoughts, settled in on what they're good at. I mean, Texas went through a period without their starting quarterback, where Arch Manning came in there and had to carry the team for a couple games. So they have a proven backup quarterback. Now if Georgia were to lose their quarterback, do they have a proven backup that could come in and win for them? I think Texas has that. So, early on, is that a factor if the quarterback were to go down? Something to think about. But I mean, Arch played pretty good for Texas in a couple games he started.
Well, I think,
a pretty good athlete.
yeah, and I think that Georgia has shown some problems with respect to a mobile quarterback this year. And even if you were as healthy, do you think that Manning becomes part of the plays involved here just to get that factor in the game?
I wouldn't be surprised if Sark had something up his sleeve where he has a little Arch Manning package that he's put together that maybe is 3 or 4 plays that in the red zone or in a situation where they could insert him and use his athletic ability, his speed, and just change the speed of the game, change the pace of the game. That would not surprise me a bit. It would actually be something smart. Now, whether the situation arises or he feels the need to pull that out and do it, I don't know. I don't even know that they've prepared that, but it's another aspect that because of how good Arch is and what he's done in games that they may have prepared a package for him, you know?
So let me ask you a question. So, you had mentioned teams grow, they change. Since that game against Texas, Georgia's had some close calls, and they didn't look as good as they did against Texas. I mean, UMass hung 21 on them. They went to 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. Um,
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. Here's what I know about college football and about college kids. I mean, they won back-to-back national championships. Then Michigan won it last year. To continue that constant consistency at that super high level, the pressure is on week after week after week. And sometimes kids and teams relax. Sometimes those, even coaches. I mean, it's hard to maintain that highest level top 5 team in the country for 4 straight years and play at that level, prepare at that level. So, I'm sure that that's what Kirby said to his team. Maybe they're not as good, but they're close. But just being able to carry that mentality through week after week after week, year after year is hard. So they've had some ups and downs. And like you said, Georgia Tech took them to 8 overtimes before they finally won. But when Georgia shows up, if they bring their A game now, they're going to be hard to beat in Atlanta. I mean, that we know because they have a really good quarterback. A lot of people are saying he may be the first pick in the draft. You know, but it's going to come down to what it always comes down to. Can you take care of the football, turnovers, explosive plays? Can you control the explosive plays defensively? And then, can you score touchdowns in the red zone? Because I think that's been the problem when both of these teams have struggled is not scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And that's hard to do because these defenses are good. And in the red zone, it's constricted space. And so it's harder to run your base offense. You've got to run some unique stuff. Um,
y- you know, the from a coaching standpoint as well, they've had 3 common opponents, I believe. And if you look at these scores, for example, they both played Kentucky. Georgia eked out a close win against Kentucky, 13-12, and
right.
Texas had no problem with them. Mississippi State scored 31 against Georgia, although both won those pretty handily. And then Florida, 34-20 for Georgia and 49-17 for Texas. Are you, as a coach, going looking at some of that film to see what worked, what didn't on common opponents, or is that irrelevant?
No, it's very relevant. That's one of the things you do is you go look at what were the explosive plays in the run game and the passing game that Texas gave up against common opponents. And then you see if there's a weakness there that somebody else exploited that you didn't. And then you see if you want to capitalize. So you really do. We have cut up reels that we use of explosive run plays, explosive pass plays they've given up. The same thing, you look at the other side of the ball, looks at, what they're doing offensively, like how are they running, what are they doing? So it's just, you do, the common opponents are big. And you can't break down and have a 11 or 12 game scouting report. That's too much information. So you try to pick the opponents that are similar to you in their style, similar to you in what they do to watch. So who does Georgia think that Texas, played that has similar looking offenses, that has similar styles, that run similar plays, and they're going to look at those. So yeah, you pick out of those 12 games the 5 games you think would show you the best picture of what you might see, and then those are the ones you tend to focus on, and then you have your analysts and your graduate assistants watch the other 7 games just to see if there's any unique special stuff that's going on there, any special plays, anything unique, anything different that didn't show up in the 5 game scouting report that you use. So it's more in depth than you think, but yeah, you kind of pick over those 12 games and decide which ones you want to focus on because you think they're most relevant based on what those teams do compared to what you do.
And comparing against a common opponent might reveal either what worked on your flaw or what you missed, I guess, is
Yes,
kind of what you're
exactly.
saying.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to give you a picture of what they struggle with or what they're good at, vice versa. So it's because once again, you can't be a coach in the middle of a game and be sorting through the information of 12 games and it just can't go through your head that fast. You have about 15 to 20 seconds, like we talked about, make a decision as a coach on a play call, and you can't sort through that volume of information in your mind. It has to be condensed down into a smaller package of what they do and what you're expecting.
So, go back to the first game they played, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beck had 175 yards through 3 interceptions. Since then, I'm not sure that he's thrown any interceptions, yet Georgia struggled. And to me, I think the best unit on this field is Texas's defense.
I think that's where Texas has grown. I think from the first game, their defense hadn't seen the Georgia speed, the Georgia, they just didn't. It's hard to make your team practice like that in the preseason. It's hard to go full go and get that. And then all of a sudden, here comes Georgia, and they've got a lot of talent and come out there. And now that Texas has settled in and started playing, their defense has really stepped up. And I would agree with you that that's probably their most improved unit. That's probably their most consistent. And so, Georgia's got their hands full there. They've got to be balanced. They've got to be able to run the ball. They can't put it all on their quarterback.
And they're without their leading rusher, aren't they?
Yes.
Trevor Etienne, it's out.
And that
And with
changes the game. That's going to put more pressure on the passing game, more pressure on their quarterback. And I don't think Georgia's quite as good on their offensive line as they've been. I think they lost some really good players to the NFL. And I think, they've struggled a little bit more protecting the quarterback a little bit more up front. It doesn't mean they're not good. I mean, they're still very good, but they're not, quite what they were. And so it shows up a little bit.
you've coached in the national championship game, obviously. You have a team who's won 2 in a row. They didn't even make it last year, but you've got a team that they haven't been close in a while. How much does that factor in, do you think?
I think for Texas, I think they are hungry. I think their team, their coaching staff, their fan base, they're hungry. So I don't think Sark will hold anything back. He'll let it rip. I think either team loses the game, they're still in the playoff. I think that's probably realistic, but I do think they'll pull all the stops out to go win this game, and I do think Texas will be extremely hungry to get the conference title, to win the championship in the SEC. First year in the conference. Think about that. Your first year in the SEC and you win it. That's pretty impressive. That would be something that they would be proud of, in Longhorn country for sure. And probably unheard of to enter a conference of that caliber and then come right in and win the conference. Because I think a lot of people said, well, they're coming out of the Big 12. That's not quite the SEC. Are they ready for this? And they've shown they are. So.
Yeah, and I think that Texas D is going to step up. I think Texas is going to win, and they're going to cover the 2.5 points on that game. That's my personal opinion. I just, based on the way Georgia's been playing, based on what I consider some very fortunate breaks in the first game.
Yeah, and I'm going to go along with you there. I'm not going to disagree. I do think that I think it's Texas's year. I think they're set up for this. I think they're ready. I think they're so even though Georgia is probably playing what you would consider a home game, they've played a lot of games in Atlanta. I think I'm going to go with Texas too, and I think it'll be an exciting game. But I think Texas will find a way to make a play or two that makes the difference, and I think they just have the rhythm and the confidence right now.
Well, and I think there's something maybe we'll call it the Georgia syndrome this year, where bookmakers have given them credit for being Georgia of 2 or 3 years ago because they're 2-9 against the spread this year.
Yeah,
So it
see,
would seem.
I agree with that. I think that there is some. You saw this mighty, powerful for 2 years dominate college football, and then now they've come back to the pack a little bit, and that's natural because the amount of talent and the job they were doing there, it's natural that you come back to the pack a little, and I think they have, and I think other teams have been loading up and gunning for them because, like you said, it's how many teams three-peat? Not many have ever three-peated, and in any sport, in any professional sport, it's hard to two-peat. It's hard to repeat. So, three-peat is hard. And like I said, the mental strain it takes on you, the physical strain, you're always under the gun when you're trying to three-peat. And I think you come back to the pack a little.
All right, so we've agreed on the first one, Texas to win by more than the 2.5 points.
Yep, I could see him winning by a field goal. I could see him taking a drive on winning on a field goal in the last series of the game. I could see that easily. Yep.
I'll go out on a further limb and say they easily win by a touchdown, if not more.
No, it
So,
wouldn't surprise me though. They're good enough to win by 10 or more. Yep. So, big
all
exciting game.
right. Up next, I think this is the first of two, maybe three. The playoffs start now. This is a playoff game for these teams: Boise State and UNLV.
I think you're right. I think Boise right now is in the top 12. They're 10th. UNLV's 20th. We know that the Mountain West is a group of five conference, so they don't get an automatic bid. But I think whoever comes out of that game as the victor will be the highest ranked group of five team, and I think they'll get in. So this is their playoff game. They need this game to get to the playoff. Whoever it is, if Boise loses, I think they're out of the playoff. If UNLV loses, they're obviously out. But whoever wins is in, and the other one's out, in my opinion. So now the question is, who's going to win this game?
Well, what was remarkable to me when I first saw this matchup was UNLV's quarterback walked out at the start of the season. Did he not?
Yes, he sure did. After 3 games, he said that some things hadn't come to fruition in the NIL department that he was promised, and so he was on the move.
And here UNLV is on the cusp of getting into the college football playoffs. Um,
Says a
Again,
lot for
here's
the
another.
coaching staff. It says a lot for the team and the coaching staff that they didn't let one person hijack their season.
Exactly. And um, here's another case where they played earlier in the year, right? And
Right?
UNLV almost beat Boise, and it was a late interception in the first half that really put Boise on the road to it. But UNLV battled back, and I think what was it, 29-25, I think was the final score. So
Yeah, it was a great game. It was close. The thing I think that's interesting though is where they're playing this game. Did you notice where the game is being played? So it's
it's
being
a
played
home.
in. It's a home game for Boise. So uh, I just think that's a huge advantage for them. Play at home, play on the blue turf. Take the UNLV boys where the weather's a little bit warmer than Boise, a little bit nicer, a little different climate, and they're going to go up there and it's going to be probably below 40 and cold and playing on the blue turf. And so I think UNLV is a well-coached team. Barry Odom's done a great job there. He's been there since 2022 and been fantastic. But I don't know. I'm kind of leaning towards Boise right now just because of the factors there.
Well,
That's kind of where I'm at.
Boise's got one of the better running backs in the country, Ashton Genty.
Oh, he's a Heisman finalist. I mean, that right there, if the weather's bad, that's a difference maker in itself. And so if they can't throw the ball around there, that's a huge difference maker.
But in the last game, his longest run was 16 yards, and I think he ran 40 times for about a 4.5 yards per carry average. So UNLV's shown the ability to bottle that run up.
Yeah, I think they know that they need to make them one dimensional. I mean, that's what you try to do as a defensive coordinator, as a coach. You want to make the team you're playing one dimensional. If they can keep the running game going and the passing game, you're in trouble defensively. If you can get one of them shut down and make them one dimensional, then that's. And so I'm sure with Boise and the tailback, the UNLV wants to focus on. We got to stop the run. We got to stop the run. We got to make them win left-handed, so to speak. We got to make them win a different way.
Well, here's the interesting thing. Both of these teams run the ball more than the average team. Boise State is about 6.5% over the average, whereas UNLV's actually runs it even more than Boise. So to me, I'm thinking that takes a little bit of the weather factor out because UNLV is a predominantly run team.
I agree with you. I do think that, and I like seeing that because what they're doing is they're not making it a quarterback driven where the quarterback has to go win the game. They're going to make it as a team because running the ball is not just your tailback and your offensive line. It's your tight ends, it's your wide receivers block, and it's a team effort to run the ball. And so they've tried to take the pressure off their quarterback and not make him have to be the sole provider of offense for their team by throwing it all the time. And I think that's smart. I think that's really good football teams do that. I think last year the final four teams in the NFL were all the top four rushing teams in the NFL. So think about that with all the great quarterbacks and all that. The final four teams that were in the leading up to the Super Bowl, they were the four top rushing teams in the NFL. So there is something to be said about that.
Well, here's some interesting trends that I found. UNLV won 8 of its last 8 road games. So they are not afraid of playing on the road.
That's impressive. Mm-hmm.
Boise State has lost 4 of its 5 games against an AP ranked team where it was the favorite.
Interesting. So neutralizing the home field advantage and the fact that they're playing a ranked team because UNLV is ranked 20th. So
Now,
those
not
two,
only this coach, but in those 8 wins on the road, they covered the spread every time.
wow. The running rebels. Yep. Well, they are close to the gambling mecca of the country, so they might know a little bit about the spread. I'm just saying. They're from gambling headquarters, and I'm not saying there's anything illegal going on. I'm just saying that it's just kind of a coincidence that they cover and. But I think that's a sign of a really well-coached team. I think the bottom line is Barry Odom's done a fantastic job there. That they're well coached. They're not one-dimensional. They come at you. I think they play pretty good defense as well. They were able to lose their starting quarterback, and they haven't missed a beat. So my hat's off to them and the coaching staff and the players about what they've done there. And they've done that consistently over the last couple of years. So it's not just a one-year phenomenon.
Right. So I do think UNLV on the road is going to cover the spread. They're going to win outright and cover the spread.
What is the official spread? I didn't even write that down.
Boise State is given 4.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Well, as much as I love UNLV and I like their coaches and what they're doing, I'm going to disagree with you on this one. I'm going to lean towards Boise just because I've seen Boise at work over the years and even this season on the blue turf up there in Idaho, and I just think that's going to give them the home field advantage enough to carry them. Spencer Danielson and that team have done a great job since he took over, and I think they're going to keep their spot in the playoff and win it, and get their slot in the playoff.
All right, so we got one difference. So I do think it's going to be a lower scoring game, as the weather and the cold is. I think it's going to be a run orientated game, but we'll see. Clemson, SMU.
Ooh, there we go to the ACC.
The question is this a playoff game? If Clemson loses, obviously they're out. But if Clemson somehow wins, Is SMU out?
That is the question for the committee. And so I think this game's going to come down to winner, loser, and style points. I mean, if Clemson beats SMU by 1 point, Clemson's in because they won the ACC. Is SMU drop out of the top 12, losing to Clemson by a point or two? That is going to be the. Now, if SMU loses by 2 touchdowns, they probably drop out of the playoff picture. But and obviously, if they win, they're in because right now they're in at number 8. So a lot of things can happen, and this game's in Charlotte, so it'll be interesting.
And SMU, I think offensively, they can make some style points. They can earn a lot of style points with this offense they have.
Yeah, they Rhett Lashley, their coach. He is the Gus Malzahn guy, so he was with Gus at Auburn, and then he went down to the University of Miami, and he was down at Miami, and then from Miami he got with the Hurricanes, and then he got the head job at SMU. And since he's taken over there, they've been explosive on offense, and he's a great offensive coach. So, I think that this is a big game for SMU. I do think they're having a great year. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting storylines in this one, but I think it'll be interesting to see how the committee views this if SMU were to lose.
And Clemson's been well. Let's say their quarterback play, Casey Klubnik, has been so inconsistent this year.
Yeah, Klubnik.
Really?
I agree. I think he's shown signs, but it hasn't been consistent.
Right. So, if you go back and look at Clemson's games, every time they faced elite rushers or elite defense, they've been shut down.
Right.
And the question is, SMU probably doesn't get a lot of credit, but they're a top 15 defense. Maybe it's.
I know what you're saying, and because their offense has been so explosive, and their head coach is known for an offensive guy, so they tend to get more notoriety on that side of the ball. But that's why they're 11-1, because they have a defense that plays at the same level as their offense, and they've been able to win a lot of games with a very big margins of victory. So it's been impressive, and they've. I'm excited about SMU football being back in the picture, the national picture. I think they've earned the right to be number 8. So I think that's, and they've been very consistent. They've beaten good teams too. I think they've had a pretty good schedule.
And I'm looking at. I just pulled up Clemson's schedule because a thought just occurred to me that I'm not. I think Clemson has 1 win against a team over 500 this year.
Yeah, I think Clemson's come back to the pack again. They had a 2 or 3 year run where they were kind of the top dogs. It was Alabama, and then Clemson snuck in there, and then all of a sudden, I think they've come back to the pack a little bit as college football changed with the portal and NIL and all that, and every team's managed that differently. And this isn't really a time to discuss how they've managed the portal and NIL because they haven't been a big portal operation. They haven't been a team that want to go out and acquire talent through the portal. That hasn't been their mode of operation. They've liked acquiring and developing their own talent through the high school ranks. So, but it's they've come back to the pack a little bit. They've had some premier NFL first round quarterbacks, and the last couple of years they haven't had that. I mean, I think that's affected their offense a little bit in terms of productivity because some of those guys they had playing quarterback for them were obviously first round picks and immediate first year starters in the National Football League. So you can say what you want, but the NFL has a pretty good idea of what they're doing and who they're picking for those slots.
Well, here's some interesting trends, and I'm not saying that trends aren't made to be broken, but SMU's covered the spread 11 out of 12 games this year.
Right.
Clemson, 6 out of 12, 5 times out of 12. Interestingly, the team ranked 8th in the AP poll has failed to cover the spread in 4 of its last 5 games. So it seems like slot 8
is jinxed.
is jinxed.
I don't know if it's jinxed, but yeah, it's whatever. Is that a coincidence? Is that a tough slot to be in? But it's interesting because those are really, there's nothing concrete you can say about that. There's no statistical analysis other than it's just a fact that 8th ranked teams are struggling. But for what reason, no one knows. But there's no common theme to that. They're not all those 8th ranked teams were from this conference, or all those 8th ranked teams were offensively
Right.
driven, or all. I mean, there's not a common denominator, so it's hard to pinpoint what that is. But it's just one of those facts that's out there, you know.
All right. So I got 2 questions for you.
Yeah.
Clemson's +2. What do you like?
Well, I personally like SMU. I think what you said earlier about Georgia, that sometimes the betting world thinks of Clemson in the old, a few years ago when they overpowered people and had first round quarterbacks. And I think those days they've settled in a little bit and come back to the packs. And I think SMU's on the rise. I think SMU's hot. I think they're hungry. And I think SMU knows if they lose this game, they're probably out of it. So this is a playoff game to SMU. So they will pull out all the stops. Their head coach will be aggressive. Their defense will be aggressive. They will go after this one. They will find a way to get SMU back in the playoffs, and they got to win this game to do it because I think they know there's a good chance they might drop out if they lose it. And so I'm picking SMU to win and to cover, and see how it
Comfortably.
goes. What's that?
To cover comfortably, I think.
I do. I do too. I think if they get going and they get the momentum going on offense and they get in rhythm now, and like you said, they'll do some things to try to disrupt Clemson's quarterback to get Cade off balance a little bit, and they'll come after him enough to get him out of sync. And you just need a few stops. They move the ball and score a lot of points. So if they can get a couple stops each half on defense, they'll get some separation score wise, and I think they'll be in pretty good shape.
All right, so we both agree on that one. Now,
Yeah.
we had a question where somebody missed our pick for the Army game yesterday, and we were both in agreement on this one. So, you
Yes.
having coached and spent a lot of time at Army, I'll let you recap who the pick was.
Yeah. So we both picked the Black Knights. Number one, they're playing at home. Number two, it's going to be bad weather or cold weather. It's not very nice at this time of year on the Hudson. I coached there for 13 years. You can see the picture behind me is Mikey Stadium. So right there's a picture of Mikey Stadium. So the Cadets are very tough at home. That crowd it's a Friday night game. Tomorrow night, I think they'll have a good crowd. I think the Corps Cadets will be crazy. I think they'll be excited. And I think they know that if they win this game that, they could possibly slide into a playoff spot as well. So, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think we both believe that Army will find a way to tough it out. And a team from New Orleans coming up north, coming to the Hudson River. It'll be cold and windy on the Hudson. I will promise you that Friday night. And I don't know the exact temperature. I didn't see the weather report, but I've never coached a game in December at West Point that was ever a nice.
Uh-oh. I lost my co-host. Hopefully he'll jump back on. So while he's reconnecting, oh, there he is. All right.
Here we go.
So Army to cover, right?
Yeah, so we both picked Army to cover, and we think that they'll, win by a touchdown or so at home at West Point. Mm-hmm. And I think the non-travel, I think that helps Army not having to travel one less day of preparation because they both played Saturday. So Tulane's got to travel on a short week and travel a long distance from New Orleans to New York is a long trip. where the cadets will take advantage of that and they'll get some extra rest, and that'll be beneficial to them at the end of the season here.
All right, let's move on to the next game. Where a game where at the beginning of the season, I don't think anyone would have picked these two teams to be playing for the Arizona State and Iowa State.
Yeah, the Big 12 title game. So they'll play that down in Dallas, I think, at AT&T there, where the Cowboys play. Iowa
Here's what
State had their first 10-win season in the history of their program. How about that?
How about this for a trend? Arizona State 10-2 against the spread so far this year, but right behind them is Iowa State at 7-4 against the spread.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't think people believe that Arizona State was going to be as good as they were.
Preseason number 6 pick in the Big 12.
Yeah, number 6 in the Big 12, and now look at them. They're playing in the championship game. I don't think necessarily people thought that about Iowa State either. I mean, and look at Iowa State, like they said, their first 10-win season in the history of their football program, which I think is 120 plus years of football.
And this is another game. It's the first game of the playoffs because the loser is not going to be in the game.
Yes, this is a playoff game for both of these teams. So whoever wins is in, and whoever loses knows they're out. So this is a playoff type game for them. The atmosphere will be fun for both of those teams in Dallas. It'll be interesting to see how they travel, how their fan bases travel, because I know Iowa State at home it's crazy there. That's a great place to play at home. And I've played Arizona State out there in Tempe, and their home games have been exciting, the ones I've been to and coached against. So be interested to see how they travel to Dallas. And because these programs haven't been in this kind of a venue before recently, or, playoff type caliber game, I think their fan bases will be excited to go watch them.
And, the strengths match up. Iowa State's more effective at throwing the ball than running it. Arizona matches up better against the run, I guess, than the pass. It's going to be it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't see an outcome where one of these teams pulls away from the other one here.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I don't know that either one has that type of explosiveness on offense to maybe just separate by 2 or 3 touchdowns. So I think this will be a tight, hard-fought game. I have some bias in this game, so I got to throw that out there, that the head coach at Iowa State went to my alma mater, Mount Union. He's a guy I know very well. He was a guy that at one time tried to get a GA position working with me when I was an offensive coordinator, and we ended up hiring somebody else, and he ended up becoming the head coach at Toledo because we didn't hire him, and he went to Toledo and then got hired there eventually as the head coach. So it worked out better for him that he didn't come to work with me. But I've known Matt Campbell for 20-some years, 25 years, and I'm loyal to alumni, and he's a good person, and he's done a great job there. And he's won 10
He's
games.
taken Iowa State and been able to build a consistent contender in the Big 12 with them, and he took that program from the depths of the bottom of the basement of the standings.
Yeah, there's been some good coaches gone through Iowa State, and they've never had the kind of consistency that Matt's had. And Matt's done a great job there, and he has some other Mount Union alumni on the staff. So I'm excited to watch them play. I'm excited to see what they do. I'm really good friends with the defensive coordinator at Iowa State. He was the head coach at Youngstown State. He coached with me for 1 year at Army. He was a coach at Army with us. So John Haycock is the defensive coordinator there. And so I got a couple biases. I probably have a little bit of a lean because of people that I know. But I just think that,
Excuse me.
If we're ready to make picks, I'm probably going to lean towards my pick being Iowa State to win it, just because I have coaching bias with the defensive coordinator and the head coach, so I know both of them pretty well. I don't know really anybody on the Arizona State staff, but I have great respect for what Kenny's done this year. I mean, he's a young guy. He came from Oregon. He went back to his alma mater. A lot of people are like, how can they hire him? He's so young, blah, 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 blah. And everybody was doubting him and thinking of a million reasons why he couldn't. And you know what? He did. So he did. He had a
So,
great year and couldn't be happier for what he's done at Arizona State because they should be, that should be a place you can win. And so I'm happy for him as an alumnus getting it going.
so here's why I'm going to say Iowa State, because they're number 3 in passing yards allowed, but they're 96th against the run. Arizona State can run the ball, but they're a middling team, average passing team. So they're both going to be able to play for their strength. Um, and I think Iowa State is, with the coaching factor there. I see Iowa State getting the lead early, and it's going to be hard for Arizona State to get back in the game. So I agree with you. Iowa State to cover.
Yeah, I think you're right in that regard. You know, John Haycock, the defensive coordinator, is a guy my age, so he's a gray-haired coach who's been around a lot of football, and and Matt's been a head coach now for quite a while and been very successful at Toledo and at Iowa State, and was really recruited hard to leave Iowa State and go to other schools, and he stayed there to continue to build a program and be loyal to Iowa State, and that's unusual in today's college football environment. And look what he's done. He's built a consistent winner there, and I'm happy
Yep,
for him.
and I'll say Iowa State wins it outright. But here's just 2 more trends that are going against us, Coach. Arizona State has won each of its last 9 games when they're a favorite.
Wow.
Not only that, in the last 7 games as a favorite, they've covered the spread. I
Yeah,
say the
well,
spread
I'm
is
going to say the only thing I say, I don't know everything. I know the guys that make these odds and work out of Vegas are really, really smart people. So, but I'm going to go against them this time.
10. I'm with you, Coach.
I,
So
I don't know why. Maybe it's biased. Maybe it's gut. I mean, because sometimes the facts don't always we don't always see the facts when they're right in front of us. But I just feel like Iowa State's going to dig in and they're going to find a way to do it, and be excited to see them win and get in the playoff. I'd love to see an Iowa State get in the playoff.
well, growing up as a Cleveland sports fan,
You are? I didn't know that with the Browns there. I didn't know you were a Cleveland.
usually when I was a kid, you know, the Cleveland team was out of it by the time the next sport started. So we just kind of moved on. And so
Yeah.
championships and the playoffs and stuff took on a lesser importance because as a kid, you always had that eternal hope that this was going to be the year. Um, but here, this last game, right, with
Yes.
the Big Ten championship, and you have Franklin and the Penn State fans kind of in that same boat, right? I mean, he has a long record of futility against top 10 teams, right? 3-17.
Yes. Yes. So that's been his Achilles heel, so to speak. Yes.
And I can sympathize with them. And again, here comes the bias, right? I can close my eyes and see the how Penn State performed against Ohio State or Michigan or any of the other top teams over the last 3 or 4 years, and it's not been well. But this is a different Penn State team, isn't it, Coach?
I think it is. I think it's different. They hired a new offensive coordinator this past year. He came from the University of Kansas, and he's provided some new wrinkles, some new energy offensively. And so they've diversified, and that's been good for them. I think they've always had good talent at Penn State. They always recruit well. They're a well coached. They play hard, but they've always struggled to score enough points or make the plays they needed to play in those big games. And so I think their new offensive coordinator has helped them be more productive on offense and be more explosive. And so I think that's something to factor into this thought process about this game.
Here's some things that surprised me when I pulled it out. The offensive points per game, 35.2 for Oregon, 33.3 for Penn State.
hmm
The defensive points per game, 16.2 for Oregon, 14 for Penn State.
So really just the same differential, just 2 points below, because everybody talks about Oregon and how they are offensively, but when you talk about Oregon offensively and then Penn State's only 2 points behind them, I mean, is that big of a difference? Not really. So that's what my point about Penn State's offense has a different look to it, a different feel to it, in my opinion. When you watch them play, is they're really exciting, and they've diversified and they do a lot of things, and that's been a great addition for them.
Now, let's go back to the common opponents here, and let's take Ohio State out of the equation just for now.
Okay.
So they've had 6 other common opponents. In half of those, or I would say Oregon had the better game, and in the other half, Penn State. So again, evenly matched teams are what you're looking here. And even the Ohio State game, right? It took Oregon a little, you know, I don't know
Yeah.
if you call it controversy, but it was a close game, obviously,
Very.
and, and Penn State Ohio State was a 2013 game.
No question. Well, so yeah, I think this is going to be an exciting game in Indianapolis. I mean, man, I think that place will be rocking. I think it'll be exciting. It's a night game. Uh, Obviously, Oregon has to cross the country to go play there. Penn State, not so far, to Indianapolis. So I mean, they're playing.
Although driving from College Station anywhere is it's quite the adventure. But
Well,
Dylan Gabriel, is he
yeah,
going to be in New York for a Heisman?
he could be. I think this game will help him a lot. I don't think all the ballots are in. I think this game, puts him in there. I think obviously the wide receiver at Colorado is in there. The running back from Boise's in there. Those are two guys, and I think Gabriel is. And everybody knows he was at Oklahoma last year, right?
In UCF before that, right?
Right. And so that's the power of the portal and the power of NIL money is, Oregon decided they wanted to go out and get the top quarterback that was available. And there they went. They went to
So
Oklahoma.
Penn State's got some strength. Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton as the edge rushers. Gabriel has shown he'll take risks. He's good mobile, but he'll take the risks. Is Penn State disciplined enough on defense to kind of keep him where they want him?
Yeah, that's always the key is in these games, that mobile quarterback is the wild card. And can your defense contain him, keep him in the pocket? Because we see this all the time. These mobile quarterbacks get out of the pocket and they create plays. And he's experienced, he's athletic, he keeps his eyes downfield when he's out of the pocket. So I think he could be a big factor if Penn State doesn't keep him contained. If they let those defensive ends just rush wherever they want and they lose control of this quarterback and he's on the move, I think he can create plays. So I think that is a big key to the game is those defensive ends keeping him rush up the field, keep him in the pocket, try to absorb the rush up inside and see if they can squeeze him. 'Cause he's not a tall guy. Gabriel is not a tall player, so if you keep him in the pocket and make him look over the rush, I think that's a challenge for him because I believe he's only about 6 foot tall, if you want to know the truth. And we all know that they might list him at whatever, but that's what I've been told he is. So,
Well,
because
let
we
me
all
ask you
know.
this from a coaching standpoint. Oregon, I assume Oregon's going to use a lot of motion. They're going to get people in motion, and they're going to run their running plays with a lot of people in motion.
That's their style. Yes, that's who they are offensively. They like speed and motion and distraction.
Is Penn State's defense disciplined enough to maintain their assignments, do you think?
I think that'll be maybe the key to the game, because I think what will happen is Oregon's got speed and they play fast, and they're going to look for matchups. They're going to look at, how is Penn State playing us? Are they playing us man? Are they playing us zone? Is there a matchup we can exploit? Can our number 3 receiver beat their nickel one-on-one? Can our number 2 receiver beat their corner one-on-one? Can our tight end beat their linebacker or their safety one-on-one? Like, that's what they're going to be looking for, is where they can exploit, because they do have speed at Oregon and they do have athletes, and I'm not saying Penn State doesn't, but that's, to me, how Oregon figures out how to beat you, is they get you spread out and they see where the matchup is that is best suited for them, and then they try to exploit that. And so I think that's why when you watch an Oregon team play, they have multiple formations, multiple motions, and they're trying to break the defense down and see what the defense wants to do, and then look for that matchup and then find that matchup and go to work on it. And that's how they get their explosive plays.
And Oregon, the 2 best teams Oregon played, Boise and Ohio State, both scored more than 30 on them.
Yeah.
Has Penn State's offense advanced enough that I think the winner of this game has to score 30 points?
Yeah, I do too. I think the thing that will make this an exciting game is it's indoors on a turf field in a controlled environment. So there won't be any weather issues. There won't be any slipping, rain, wind. There won't be any of that. The only thing you'll battle in Indianapolis is the noise. And, so who travels? I think Penn State will travel really nicely there. I mean, it can't be more than, about a 6-hour drive, 7-hour drive from State College there and all over the Indianapolis, because it's 3 hours from State College or 4 hours to, I don't know. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that geography, but they'll travel. Penn State fans will get in their car and they'll drive to Indianapolis, and there'll be a lot of people rooting for Penn State there. Now, I don't think Oregon will travel quite like that to Indianapolis. But that indoor environment, plays well for Oregon, because they're not going to have any elements slowing them down. Can Penn State match up with their speed? Can they be disciplined enough on defense to prevent the big plays? That's the key to the game, is Penn State defense versus Oregon's offense, because I feel like Penn State's offense will move the ball. It's just, can Penn State's defense contain Oregon, keep them from all those explosive plays, not let all the formations and motions get them to make mistakes and cut people loose, because that's what they're looking for.
And as we're coming up against it, I'm going to add one other key to the game for me is Oregon has won the first half 8 out of 9 times. 8 out of its 9 games in the Big Ten. They won the first half. They've won the first quarter 5 of its last 6 games in the Big Ten. If Allard gets behind in Penn State, can they catch back up?
Yeah, that's why I talked about what Oregon tries to do. They're going to give you multiple formations and motions. They're going to spread you out. They're going to give you looks you haven't seen, and they're going to come at you with such speed that you can't simulate in practice. So can Penn State's defense weather the storm of the first quarter and get out of the first quarter with the game still tied or close? Because, if it separates out now, can Allard drive Penn State down and make plays? And can they if they make Penn State one-dimensional by having to throw to catch up all the time, I think that plays to Oregon's advantage. So I think Oregon will try to jump out early by doing whatever they got to do to get on top with explosives, unique, unbalanced formations, stuff that they haven't showed before. So you asked me a question, I'm dodging the answer. Can Penn State's offense play from 10 down, 14 down, and come back? I think they can. It's always the question, are you patient enough? Do you feel like you have to rush back to score because you're not sure if your defense can slow Oregon down or not? If you think, hey, we just made a couple mistakes. Our defense has got them under control now. We can take our time and stay with our game plan. Then you could come back and win the game. But if they have to get outside their game plan, I don't know if they can make it a quarterback driven, win the game, and put it all in his hands. I think that's a lot on a boy from Medina, Ohio. I think he's from. Since
Well,
I'm in
look, we're
Ohio.
up against it. We got to make a pick before we go off the air.
Okay.
You've been going first. I'll take this one first. I think this is the year Penn State flips the narrative. I think their offense, Tyler Warren. I think they show Oregon that their defense isn't as good as people think. I think they're going to be another team that hangs 30 on Oregon, and they're going to win outright.
I like it. I have a bias too. I mean, I know Oregon's first year in the Big Ten. I'm just not sure they're ready to win the Big Ten. I'm not sure if they understand what they're getting ready to get into when they go to Indianapolis. I've been in that game a few times and coached in the Big Ten championship game. That is a crazy environment. I mean, Penn State will pack that place. I think Penn State will have a home field advantage with the crowd. I think that Penn State, it's their year. I do think that, it's their time to go win the Big Ten. I believe in what they're doing offensively at Penn State, and I think their defense will find a way to keep Oregon from giving up big plays. They might bend a little bit to Oregon, but if they don't break, if they don't give up the big plays, I think they can win the game. And so I'm going to go with you on that. I'm going to agree that I think Penn State comes out of that thing in a explosive game, and I think it's going to be 35-38, some 42-35. It's going to be a shootout. I think they're going to put some points up. I think people will be excited. I think that'll be the nightcap there on ABC. I believe it's an ABC game. I'm not sure, but I think it is. But the Big Ten finale will be, and I think both teams, regardless of who wins the game, both teams are in the playoff. Both teams deserve to be in the playoff. So I don't think there'll be a lot of nervousness. I don't think they'll play scared. I think both teams will cut it loose because it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, other than you get to hold up the Big Ten trophy and get a bye. You would get a bye, but I think that they both know that they can play loose, that they're still going to be in the playoffs. So I think that'll make it more exciting. Where some of these other games, it might be more conservative and people might play a little different. This one, they're gonna cut it loose.
All right, Coach, we've run up against our time limit. Appreciate
right.
all of you out there. Next Wednesday at 4:00, we'll recap our picks, and we won't be shy. We'll tell you how we did because we know it's going to be great, right?
Hey, just remember this. Don't get robbed of your Ed and Rob pick now. Next Wednesday, 4 to 6. We love talking football, and we appreciate our audience out there.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
All right, good night.